hopeless place that we're in, but I'm your liability. I know you are my liability. Yeah, I know you are my liability. Oh, what a hopeless case we could be. Yeah. Oh, what a hopeless place that we're in, but I'm your liability.
Hey, welcome to Spiritual Direction and Soul Care Sunday Live, every Sunday at 2 p.m. Really glad that you are with us today. It is a beautiful day here in Southeast Michigan. It started really cold, and now the sky is blue and the air is warm and it is sunny, and it is a real gift. I wonder how you are doing today. It just makes me think about the things I'm grateful for, and the little gifts as we walk through life. I wonder what you're grateful for today. So glad that we can be all together on Sunday Live every Sunday. If you have been hanging out with us, maybe watching over on the YouTube channel, or maybe you've heard about it, or you might just have friends who you think might really benefit from joining our community. Come invite them to join our growing community over at our Facebook page. At the link below, it's facebook.com/group/spiritual soul care. And you can get them connected, and you can connect there as well. Today, we are starting on this beautiful November 7th, our next series, our next journey called The Gifts of Imperfection. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we kick off today. But also this week on November 10, 7 p.m., midweek meditation is back every other Wednesday. And that other Wednesday is this Wednesday, November 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern. So join our Facebook group. Or if you're already a member, go check it out over there. You can see it in the events, and you can find the Zoom link there. It's a great time to be together. So I really invite you to make midweek meditation a priority. It is a great time of connection. We use our most basic spiritual practices of breathing and coming to stillness, but those are guided a much deeper way. They're guided around themes and concepts. Sometimes they're shorter ones, and then we talk about them. Sometimes they're longer meditations that are guided, and we talk about them and we connect and share, and it's a really rich healing time to be together. So I don't care what time zone you're in, make it a priority to come to midweek meditation this Wednesday, November 10 at 7 p.m. And as always, you can check out our soul care program at spiritualdirectionandsoulcare.com, that big old mouthful. We got some work to do over there. I think we need to do some things to hype up our website a little bit more, and make that a little more of a portal. Send us your ideas about things that you would want to see, content that you're looking for, all that beyond Sunday Live and maybe midweek meditation. Really want to dive into and draw from the wisdom that's in our community. So go check that out as well. I'm really excited for all of us to be here together today. I cannot wait to get into this material. It's going to be so good, and I can't wait to do it. So let's begin, as we always do, by opening ourselves to the Spirit with our most basic spiritual practices of breath, deep breathing, and giving ourselves the gift of stillness. It's kind of become a mantra for me, an axiom in the work that I do on a daily basis and the work that I do here, that each one of us is worthy of our own attention. We kind of explored that a little bit more, a little deeper in our last series about thriving in uncertainty. But it's really become a life rule for me and a really important tool in the ways that I give care to people and journey with people. And I hope it means a lot to you. I hope you really see how breathing and coming to stillness together each time not only opens us to the Spirit and to the teaching, but also just really operationalizes, puts into action the value that you are worthy of your own attention. And you are worthy of your care, and you are worthy of your love. And as you cultivate that deeper awareness within, right down to the level of being aware of one's own body, this is the things that lay the building blocks and the groundwork for being able to love others and to show compassion and to journey with others in a sustainable way. So let's do that. Let's move into a time of breathing and stillness together now. As we just simply get comfortable wherever you are, whether you're standing or sitting. Make sure your spine is tall and straight. Imagine like a string extending from the base of your spine all the way through to the top of your head, coming out of the top of your head. And we breathe. And out. Let your shoulders drop. And in. And out. Make sure all your distractions are off. If you need to go to do not disturb mode on your device or your computer, make sure you do that as we breathe. Remember this time that we live in, for all its chaos and difficulty. This is the age of the Spirit. I mean, what else can teach us to flow and be more flexible than connecting with that deep Spirit? The Spirit that heals, the Spirit of love, the Spirit of strength, the Spirit of clear thinking, the Spirit of discernment and compassion. It's not rigidity or doctrinaire sort of like abstraction that helps and empowers us to meet the day. It's the flow and breath of the sustaining Spirit that is within us and all around us. As we breathe in, each breath is a welcoming of that Spirit. As we breathe out, is a sign of our participation, our partnership with that Spirit, bringing forth life in and out. Become aware of the way your lungs expand, the way your body feels. Maybe you feel tension somewhere. Where is that? As you breathe in, imagine life and breath and light and love are coming in and flowing to that spot of tension. With each breath out, the tension leaves, the worry leaves, the frustration leaves, the burdens leave. In and out. In and out. Continue to breathe slowly. To help you come to stillness, breathe in for 3 seconds and out for 5. 3 count in, 5 count out. This technique helps slow you down, helps slow your breathing, slow your body, helps you come to stillness, give you the gift of rest. 3 count in, 5 count out. Continue to breathe. Let your worries slip away. Lay them aside. Come to stillness. If you notice tension rising in your body again, focus there and release it. Now become aware of your surroundings, the temperature of the air on your skin, the way light plays in the environment around you. Rise from silence and stillness, from breathing and rest. Move into gratitude. You are content, you are restful, you are loved, you are wise. Amen. Amen. How do you feel? Put it in the chat, even if you're watching on the replay. Just put in the chat. Let us know how you're feeling. How does coming to breath, having breath and the gift of stillness, what does it do for you today? How have you needed it today? How has it affected you today? I always feel an elevated sense of elevation, like a sense of heightened awareness of connection with myself and everything around me. become grateful for the way the Spirit is always present and always working. Jill says, feeling at peace. All right. That's awesome. All right. So today we are starting Gifts of Imperfection. This is session 1. And we are going to be looking at different themes around the gifts of imperfection. I got really inspired a couple weeks ago. I was part of a workshop that kind of unpacked these ideas and concepts and themes. And it really impacted me in a way that I was like, oh, I need to pass this along to my people that I love so much at Spiritual Direction and Soul Care. Like, got to pass this along because this is good stuff. These gifts of imperfection that we're going to be looking at. And all these ideas over these next couple of weeks are rooted in ideas from the book with the same title, The Gifts of Imperfection, or The Gift of Imperfection, from Brené Brown. So if you want to go pick up that book, go find it. It's one of her first books. I highly recommend it. But a lot of this work is rooted in it. I'm going to close my door here because someone is mowing their lawn on this beautiful day, and it's a little distracting to me. There we go. That's great. So what we're going to do in these next 4 weeks as we explore the gifts of imperfection, 3, maybe 4 weeks, I don't know yet. I'm still thinking about what Advent is going to be, because we're going to be coming up on our 1-year anniversary of Spiritual Direction and Soul Care, which started with an Advent series called Hush the Noise. And it was a really timely moment and season for us all that we really needed. And so I'm still thinking about Advent and all that. So this might be a 3-week, this might be a 4-week series that we'll do, because Advent starts on the last Sunday of November this year. So we'll see. But what we're going to really do, however long we do it, 3 or 4 weeks, what we're going to be exploring is what it means to do wholehearted living. We can live fully and openly, even in the challenges of life. That's where we find the gifts of imperfection, because nothing is perfect, right? Life is not perfect. Life is not, there's no real completeness totally in this life, right? Things can be hard, right? But we can still live wholeheartedly. We can live fully and openly, even in the challenges of life, even in the midst of the challenges we create for ourselves, even in the challenges that other people bring to us, the unwanted things, right? Like we always say, right? Being a person is hard, right? Being a person is hard. And even if everything out there was perfect, I think it's still hard sometimes to look at yourself in the mirror, with all the feelings and thoughts and paranoias and neuroses we have, and this thing we're doing called life is a beautiful, painful, delicious, and ambiguous mess many times. And ever since we started doing Sunday Live, we've talked about how we can always find gifts, even within our struggles. And I really believe that we're talking about something more than just finding silver linings, right? This isn't just the temporary coping technique or coping mechanism of reframing things, right? This is more than just finding silver linings. I think we really can. I really believe this. I think we can use the energy of our hurt and our pain to find real meaning and purpose and deeper connections to those we love. And that's really what wholehearted living is about. I mean, living wholehearted means being able to notice and identify what's really happening within yourself, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, right? And really seeing others for who they are too, especially the ones that you're most committed to, the ones that you love, right? Leaving space for them and for each other. Brené Brown says that if we want to live and love with our whole hearts, and if we want to engage with the world from a place of feeling worthy, we have to talk about the things that get in the way of that for ourselves, especially our shame or our fear or our vulnerability. I mean, so much of this life, the way I see people living, the way I see myself moving many times into self-protection, is to avoid vulnerability, right? And we have to be wise with our vulnerability, because there are people in the world who aren't worthy of our vulnerability, who can't be trusted with our real selves, right? So that's part of the wisdom of this journey. But each week, I want us to talk about how shame and worth and belonging, authenticity and vulnerability, how compassion and courage go together and are windows into these gifts of imperfection. Like, even within our shame, when we notice our shame, right? When we see the contours and shape of what is shame, when we learn to recognize it, then we can learn to lean into it and address it, right? When we see how, where we feel most alive, most worthy, most attached and connected, when we feel like we really belong, learning all the different ways that that looks, so that we can see how much there is of it in us, right? And for us, right? Um, that those are gifts that we can find, right? Because a lot of times we think feeling like I belong and feeling like I'm worthy only works this one way, right? Or only looks like these things. And we miss out on all the other ways that we've come alive in our lives. Does that make sense? You know? Betsy King McDonald in the comments here says, Brene got me when she said, when you lock up the heart in the name of productivity or to guard against vulnerability, you kill courage. That's from Dare to Lead. I think that is from Dare to Lead. And that is true. And I love that you mentioned this comment about courage, because today we are going to be talking first about compassion and courage. Compassion and courage. And I'd really invite you, whether you're watching right now or on the replay, I'd really encourage you to get out a pen, a journal, or maybe open up a note or document on your device. Whatever works best for you to help you jot down ideas, questions, concepts that stick out for you, wisdom that comes, flashes of insight as we're thinking about this material. And I want to dive into this material. And as we're doing it, as always, this community is full of so much wisdom. So let's share our thoughts in the chat too. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from you and the wisdom that fills our community. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about compassion and courage. Compassion and courage. And it's good to just kind of talk about, what is it? What is compassion? Right? What is courage? How do we define it? Right? Maybe put it in the chat right now. How would you define compassion? How would you define courage while I talk? Okay. What is compassion to you? What is courage to you? Okay. The word compassion comes from Latin words that literally means to suffer with, to suffer with someone, to suffer with someone. Compassion's not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between equals. So only when we know our own darkness, this is what Brene Brown says, only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Can we be present with the darkness of others? Jill says compassion is a care for others. Yeah, it's this coming alongside and journeying with. And I love how Brene Brown talks about how it's not a top-down relationship, right? Like, many times you see this in religious world a lot, right? Where compassion is the work of whole people coming here and coming down and caring for people who are broken or not whole or whatever, right? But Brene is saying that the best kind of compassion is literal suffering alongside. It's coming alongside as equals. It's entering into the hurt of others, right? It's a care for others as equals, right? Jill says courage being fully you, even when it's scary. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we'll get there in a minute. I love that. Betsy says my view of courage changed when I understood core to mean heart. Courage is hardiness. Yeah, letting your heart be a part of what you're doing, not withdrawn or cerebral or theoretical. Yes. Okay, this is good stuff. We'll get there in a minute. Let's talk a little bit more about compassion, then we'll get to that, because this is really good stuff about courage. I love this. Brene Brown says one of the greatest and least discussed barriers to compassion practice is the fear of setting boundaries and holding people accountable. Isn't that interesting? Holding people accountable. Compassionate people are boundaried people. Isn't that interesting? What are the boundaries of compassion? That's kind of counterintuitive, because a lot of times we think compassion is just like all in with someone, right? It's a suffering with, but what is boundaries? What are the boundaries needed for compassion, and not just the obvious stuff about like you can only care so much and pour out so much and then you do get depleted, right? What more is there? That's just something for you to think about, right? What are the other kinds of boundaries that help compassion thrive besides the obvious ones, right? And yes, the root of the word courage is the Latin word for heart, right? It's hardiness, as Betsy said, right? In one of the earliest forms, the word courage had very different definition than it does today. Courage originally meant to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. To speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. Isn't that interesting? Betsy says self-differentiation lets me be compassionate without danger of becoming resentful, right? So even as we suffer with someone, right, knowing where you end and they begin, right, knowing what even in their own personal turmoil, right, is theirs to carry, right, is theirs, is there, versus what is yours, right? Even with this suffering with, there's this knowledge of what each one of us are responsible for. And that's that accountability thing, right? Being accountable to ourselves, right? To set an awareness of who we are and what we need, right? Friar Nicholas says compassion means choosing to forget about blame or causality long enough to know how it would feel because you feel it yourself. Oh, I love that too. Yeah. Yeah. Compassion, to move with compassion, is the bracketing of blame or trying to figure out who's to blame or what's the cause, right? Why did this happen, right? One of the most crazy making questions ever, right? An invitation into re-traumatizing yourself over and over and over, right? Friar Nicholas says having compassion requires courage. Yeah. Yeah. Now, if the original meaning of courage is to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart, and compassion literally means to suffer with, it'd be interesting as you consider this week, just, if you have some instant thoughts, you can, but like be thinking about how does that work together, right? How would courage illuminate and enliven compassion? Not just the courage in the sense of like, I went headlong in and walked with someone through a hard thing, right? Carrie says, this requires patience as well. Yes, it absolutely does. Especially when when you're being called to have compassion for your kids, when they've done something dumb and you're like, you did this to yourself, what I mean? But you have to kind of step in with, requires patience with your partner, it requires patience with coworkers, right? Compassion and courage. How would these things work together more and more? Something to think about, right? I know Jill has been trained in leadership with this special leadership kind of like training person named Annie Pratt, who's brilliant. And they seem, and maybe Jill can put some comments in here because she's watching, they seem to really center compassion and not blame and not causality when a coworker's struggling or being difficult, right? Like, well, how does that compassion and the courage to like be able to lean into that, and instead of being angry at a coworker, say, hey, what's going on? How can I help you? How can I support you? Right? I think that question that I've seen when Jill's like talked to me about that training is just revolutionary, right? Because it kind of diffuses conflict and helps you move into a scenario that a lot of us don't think, oh, this situation, this argument, or this conflict requires compassion, right? Like we don't think of compassion when we think of conflict, right? And we don't think of courage as being, telling one's mind speak one's mind by telling all one's heart, right? Moving in, this is hard for me, right? Like, do you see how all these things could revolutionize even conflict for us, right? So this is good stuff, you guys, but be thinking about that this week. How can I, speaking forth truly and openly who I am, illuminate and enliven connection and compassion and care for others? How can I use all of who I am and put it out there in a way that helps heal and deepen connections with others? Something to think about, Jill says, you did good. It's always part of the process. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I explained it well. That's good. So yeah, like How would you see courage illuminating compassion? Then how would you use compassion as your primary tool going into conflict? And like conflict's never fun. That's one of those imperfections in life. But here's one of these gifts, courage and compassion, that could transform a conflict into possibly a gift. I love it. I love it. So here's a couple more things. I want to talk a little bit more about compassion and courage. Well, I remember I said a little earlier, like I wanted us to see different ways compassion and courage and maybe shame or self-compassion, worth and belonging. A lot of times we have a very narrow definition of like, this is the only way compassion shows up in my life, right? These are the only ways that I exhibit courage in my life, right? And so, like, I want to maybe throw a couple things out there. Some of these will be obvious, but how does compassion and courage show up in you, in me, many times, right? Maybe write this down or throw it in the chat. What's like the first most obvious way that you know that you're being compassionate in any given situation, or you know that you're being courageous? Throw that in the chat while I share this. Here's some other ways that courage and compassion might show up, how they might show up through you in your life, right? So first one is whenever you share yourself and your story with others. Whenever you're sharing yourself and your story, this is courage, right? Speaking of your whole mind with your whole heart, right? Sharing yourself. This is actually courage. It's not just the practical, clunky, building blocks of building a relationship. It's not just pragmatic. It's courageous. Every time you share a piece of yourself, sharing your story with others, and it also, I think, is a way compassion shows up, right? Because when you share your story, when I share my story, when I share who I am, my heart, my concerns, where I'm really coming from, you're letting others know that they can too, right? Maybe you're giving permission in that moment through your courage. That's activating a kind of compassion where people go, oh, I didn't know anybody else struggled with that. I didn't know anybody else felt bad about that. I didn't know that made anybody else angry. Man, I always felt we were all alone in our parenting, or I always felt I was all alone in my marriage, or I always felt like, oh, well, wow, like the things that you see, right? I didn't know anybody else. Man, I, can't fix it, but like at least somebody else has a crappy boss too. I like this person sharing about that, right? You get my point, right? But this, just sharing yourself and your story, that's a way that compassion and courage are showing up. You're bringing it, right? Another thing is whenever you're trying your best to be authentic, Notice I'm not saying, it's only there when you are successful at being 100% awesomely authentic, right? Whenever you're trying your best to be real, to be real about who you are. That's courage. Whenever you share your truest self, whenever you try to limit the false self. What's the false self? All the image driven conscious stuff, all the part of you that's like, what if they think this, or what if I'm this, or people need to think that about me, and I need people to approve of my life and think I'm okay, like all that stuff, right? It shows up in like, all the weird petty things of like, I don't drive as nice of a car, have as nice clothes, I don't like my body compared to that person's body, I don't do this, I'm not successful, blah, blah, right? That's all the currency of the false self. And when you go, no, I'm not going to buy into that. When you're trying to limit that false self, right? And step into, hey, true self is I buy into that sometimes, right? This is courage. And this is compassion. When you speak your truth to self and others, and you're real with yourself and with others, this is compassion and courage showing up. When you share your feelings and your emotions, right? When you're able to look at people and go, hey, I just want to be really honest, that thing over there, this part of this conversation, it really makes me angry. Or I just want you to know I'm really nervous, or I'm not feeling good today. I'm really sad. Or man, I'm so excited because fill in the blank, right? Whenever you share your feelings and emotions, this is courage. Anytime you take a risk is courage, obviously, right? Another play that you might be able to see compassion and courage showing up, the way you are expressing this, is whenever you share critique or receive critique, you know? I'm not talking about criticism, Criticism is as you didn't do, criticism is like someone wrapping critique in a posture and attitude of offense, right? Being negative, Have you ever known somebody who's just always like poking holes in everything, Like they can never really come up with a good idea, but they're always ready to like point out what's wrong with anything that you're doing. Some of us have coworkers like this, people who don't work, right? People who don't want to do the work, you know? It's like that's that negative critical spirit, right? But I'm talking about critique and receiving critique, like saying, hey, XYZ, that might not be the best way to do this for you because I think this and this and this. I don't know if that's your best self. I don't know if that's really going to be good for you. Is that if you continue on this course action, do you think that's how do you think that's going to work out okay? Like do you see the difference in these things? You so sharing critique, receiving critique, these are ways that you show up with compassion and criticism and courage. Diane says, what do you do when your expression of self is turned back on you in a mean-spirited, almost evil comeback? Yeah, that's a great question. And here's a couple things. My gut reaction, here's real talk. My gut reaction when that happens to me is to go into self-protection mode and to say, well, screw that person. They're not safe. They're done forever. You know what I mean? And maybe depending on the situation, that might be the right response. Right. But curiosity, especially if it's a person you're committed to, a person that you have a long-term relationship that you need to maintain, you know what I mean? Or feel like you want to maintain before you go to the immediate cutoff and show zero tolerance for something. And you have to think about, I think, who that person has actually been. And if this is consistently how they actually are, maybe they're just having a bad day, when people come back at your vulnerability and true expression of self, who you are, and they come back with judgment, anger, they think somehow it reflects poorly on them, they make it about them and they squash it, they're threatened by a lot of us are threatened by just people being honest and open, right? Um that's those are all signs of things that are hurting in them, you know Diane says this coworker repeatedly does this. Well, if it's a coworker who repeatedly does it, uh, then I would say there's a good sense of, compassionate people or boundaried people having a sense of maybe they're not ready for you. It might not be that they're a bad person or anything like that. It might just be, they're just not ready. They're not on the journey and a place in their course of study called life where they're ready for your kind of openness, you know, and that's okay, you know, like you. I wish they were because I think you're great, Diane. I wish they were ready for the gifts that your presence would bring to them, but maybe they're just not ready. I remember when working in church world when people would get, have their baggage and they try to make it about the church or you or whatever, right? And then they'd leave in a huff, and I'd say, man, we could really help you with your issues, like we could really journey with you. But if you don't want to journey with us or you've identified your issues with us when we haven't done anything, then I wish we could help you, but it's clear you don't want to receive help from us. It's the same thing with when people can't accept you, you know, um, I, you can't say that's my problem because you can't accept me. That's your problem. right? That's your problem. I wish it wasn't, but you know. So I think kindness and compassion, curiosity are really key, and then good boundaries. Hope that helps. Other ways that we see courage and compassion showing up, right, are just participating in real life relationships. You know, you know what I mean? Like the risk of being open with other people. That's kind of what we were just talking about, right? Like being a person's hard, and people don't, and people are hard, and people are hard, right? Like the existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said, hell is other people. He was a little being a little dark there, but like there's a little bit of truth to that, right? Like other people can be really difficult and hard, right? So like just you never know what you're going to get with people sometimes. So just putting yourself out there into relationships and all that is courage, you know? And I think also too, then identifying and sharing your boundaries with people, right? When somebody responds poorly to you, maybe saying, hey, I was just trying to put that out there and sharing, and that's really hard to do. That's hard for me when you respond to me like that, and it's okay if you don't want to have me share with you. But then you just got to know, like, being talked to that way, that's really hard for me. It doesn't really work for me, right? That's like not a mean way of saying something, right? But that's courage. That's also compassion. That's compassion for the other person, saying, hey, for whatever reason, not going to judge it. You kind of stepped on a little bit of a landmine here, or you got into a minefield when it comes to things that are hard for me. Just want you to know, because I don't want conflict between us. I don't want you to get hurt in that, and I don't want to be hurt either. We're just gonna, does that kind of make sense? These different ways that like courage and compassion can show up in your life, um what and so like and what are so the yeah so that's that, right? The how does this also manifest, right, in other ways, right? How can you, like, we talk about how it shows up in you and the things that you're doing in your day to day. Where else can it show up? How can we consciously project um, compassion and courage to others? Well, when you sit with someone in their feelings, right, not trying to fix or anything, right, but just sitting with someone in their feelings, whether they have fear or sadness or happiness or guilt or loneliness or anger or joy or whatever, just being present with someone, right? Passion, right? Suffering, compassion, to suffer with. A lot of it, the word passion has developed beyond suffering to mean like deep, intense, focus and everything, right? So good or bad, right? Being with people in it, right? Mirroring it. This is just a very simple way that you're actually showing compassion and courage with someone. The kind of one step deeper with that too is where we sit when it is difficult, right? Sitting with pain and suffering with someone, right? Not moving to fixing, right? Not moving into resourcing interventions too quickly, right? But helping this one alongside by journeying with them, just feel the feelings, right? That's what so much of our basic spiritual practices are about, right? That's what midweek meditation is about getting in touch with our where we actually are, feeling our bodies, feeling our feelings that we attach the sensations of our bodies, feeling these feelings, because like if they when you suppress or push away the feelings, they come back and they rule, right? They lead you into impulsivity or into addiction or into um, uh, uh, self-destructive behaviors or risky behaviors, right? So like this is one of the most holy sacred ways that we can enact compassion and courage, is not feeling like we have to take responsibility for another person's feelings by fixing or resourcing interventions, but by simply being with and helping embody a being with, let's feel this. And there was a time before the feeling, and there's going to be a time after the feeling. So especially with pain and suffering, just journeying with it as opposed to trying to push it, suppress it, medicate it, right? Let's just feel it. Let's feel it together. I can't imagine, like being with it, validating it in that way, in this really practical way, not talking about it, not analyzing it until they're ready, just sitting in the pain with people, right? I think another way that you bring compassion and courage, you can do it with people, is just recognizing and letting deep connections exist. Recognizing and letting deep connections with people exist, right? It doesn't matter what it is, right? But having a posture of looking and seeing the deep connections that are all around us and just letting them be what they are. Not wanting them to be better, not evaluating them, not wondering if they're as good as someone else's connections, right? Just seeing how deep connections are all around us to remind all of us of our deeply interconnected reality. Another way that you can bring compassion and courage into your spaces is establishing clear professional boundaries, right? Clear professional boundaries. This isn't just with workplace interactions, but also it's about like being done with work when you say you're going to be done with work, right? Like walking out the door when it's time to walk out door, closing the computer if you work at home, right? When it's time to close the computer, paying attention, right? To those clear realities. These are what some of the ways that you hold yourself and others accountable to, right? And then also, finally, I think one of the most powerful ways that we bring compassion and courage to ourselves and to others is when we hold ourselves accountable by knowing our needs and wants and intentions, right? Paying attention to yourself, worthy of your own attention, right? Being accountable to yourself, not anybody else, not doing it to anybody else's satisfaction, because you can't be you to somebody else's satisfaction. That's not how it works. You've got to do you for you, right? You have to hold yourself accountable to yourself about knowing what you need and what you want and what your intentions are in every interaction. That's for you, right? And when you do that, that takes courage because you're looking honestly and wholeheartedly at yourself, right? And it's an act of compassion because what it means is it brings a better self-defined human into the energetic space that's shared with other humans, right? Knowing exactly what you are and what you're about and what you need, not in like a throw it around elbows and thumbs, do I need what I need, but like being clear, right? Actually serves other people. It sets them up for success. See? Judy says here, showing vulnerability and simple, bold truthfulness, especially to those with authority or worldly power, has been met over and over again in my life with overt hostility. Whistleblowing, truth-telling, even when the truth one expressed is phrased with compassion, not personal blame, is treated like the problem rather than the solution. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Whether this occurs in a narcissistic family dynamic or within broken systems, and showing emotion for suffering endured, which evidences injustice done against oneself or other innocents, seems to be a big no-no to those who want to stay uncomfortably unconscious within the status quo. This is particularly painful for me today. Do you have any advice? Oh man, this is a big one, right? I don't know what I can offer you right now. I'd love to hear from others as well, but like I feel this. I really love how you've like really summed up something real here. How when we move into spaces aware of our needs and wants, we move in aware of the needs of others, right? To journey with them. When we signal frustration, maybe with the status quo that is harming ourselves or others. And then it seems like inevitably people react with, why are you so angry? Right? Or people get more freaked out, I'd say immaturely reactive to your emotions, the strength of your emotion or the strength of your opinion, than the actual substance of the issue at hand, right? the actual burning need of the person at hand, right? Whether it's yourself or someone else, right? I see this. I absolutely see this. It drives me nuts. It drives me nuts. It absolutely drives me bonkers nuts. Okay. So, like, I'm with you in this journey, Judy, because I don't get it either. Like, I don't get it, you know. We've talked about this before, I think, over the last year. Like, when someone says, "Why are you so angry?" It's like, well, why aren't you angry about that over there? There's something wrong if you're not. You know what I mean? So it's like, I just wonder, right? I just wonder if, depending on the nature of the relationship, if you can say, "Hey, I'm noticing this. This is how I'm experiencing this. Can you help me kind of understand why this is the way it is, or why it seems like you're responding this way?" Like, if they're safe enough, I would say, if you can explore, lean in, and ask questions and demonstrate curiosity, because they might not even realize, right? Because our culture is so enculturated, is so shaped toward this sort of reactivity, instead of pushing through that initial pain into the depths behind it, right? Um, so maybe just by simply asking, gently naming and asking, do we might be serving that person to surface an awareness and a healing that they didn't even realize that they needed. You know what I mean? Um, and that's only if they're open, right? And we can't make people be open. You can't put anybody on a growth schedule, right? You know what I mean? So yeah, that's a hard one. I hope that's helpful. But like, let's keep thinking about it. Let's keep reflecting on it. Let's keep seeing how things work and don't work around us when we do this stuff, right? Because maybe maybe there'll be a breakthrough. I don't know. Until then, I'll be frustrated with you too. You know what I mean? Like, in the sense of, I will also be frustrated along with you, like, because it's annoying. It's weird. It's just so weird. And it ends up people blaming you for their discomfort about something they just won't face about themselves, right? It's just very, very interesting. It's very, very interesting to me. So we've thrown a lot of things out there, right? I've thrown a lot of things out there. What are other ways that you experience compassion and courage, right? What are other ways that you experience compassion and courage? Maybe throw it in the chat, and let us know. And maybe some of you have advice for Judy today, about what it looks like when people are resistant to one's compassion, or resistant to the courage that is needed in the space. What does that mean for you? Maybe somebody has an answer, or maybe some of you have just had that same experience. How have you handled it? How have you navigated through it? Right. Judy also says here that she just reported finding her elderly mother last year in the worst gross medical neglect while visiting her brother under a conservatorship. And the police treated me as if I was a suspect during the questioning. It really triggered my PTSD. No wonder people don't report fraud and abuse. Yeah, like, that's the thing too, is like, a lot of times our systems are filled with very gruff, sort of like, let's minimize as quickly as possible, because the system's so overloaded with challenges and problems, right? That there's this kind of skepticism by the part who are entrusted, but on the part of the people who are entrusted with fixing or hurting, helping, or healing a situation. They're so overloaded. And that's the thing too, is like, a lot of times I feel like when I'm reacting at somebody, or somebody else is reacting, maybe that's a sign that they're overloaded. Maybe that means that they're at their max. Maybe if they were a container, maybe like my overflow of joy, or my overflow, or whatever, got into their container and splashed out in a way that wasn't helpful. Like, they just can't handle anymore. Maybe they're just fragile. I want to always move toward, and I think this is where compassion and courage this is some of my work in compassion and courage, is learning to have the compassion to not assume the worst about a person reacting poorly, right? But to simply say, maybe they're having a bad day, maybe they're just fragile, right? Maybe this was a life lesson that they're not ready for, right? Like, framing things in terms of their weakness, not their malice, right? Because I'm weak too, and I'm frail too. They're weak and they're frail too, right? We're all frail. Being a person's hard, right? So instead of like framing their reactivity and their meanness as harm or evilness or something about that's bad in their character, maybe it's just they're weak, they're frail, It's like Diane says, but maybe they need a kick in the butt. Well, that too, right? What's that joke about? Sometimes people need a high five in the face with a chair. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. Yeah. So there's that too. There is a time for that, Carrie says, I've been trying to do this a lot lately as well. So let's keep trying to do it. Right. Just, especially with those who are closest to you. Like if you find yourself constantly assuming the worst about the people who are closest to you, who've been in it with you all this time, right? And then you're like, you know what I mean? That's about you. That's not about what's actually happening. That's about something about you that you've got to give yourself compassion and have the courage to really look at within and to let it be healed, right? So that you can maintain and deepen those connections that you have, right? Judy says, something tells me my overflow load was a lot heavier than the conservator stealing mom's money while leaving her for dead. Yes, I hear that. Yes. And this is where compassion for self, and we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks too, will come into play. In her book, Gifts of Imperfection, Brene Brown says this: owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from our story. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love and belonging and joy, the experiences that actually make us most vulnerable. Isn't that interesting? Love, belonging, and joy are actually the experiences that make us most vulnerable. They're the ones where we're the most open and the most tender, right? Brene says, only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. So may you embrace the gift of courage in the face of fear and the gift of compassion in the face of pain. And may you see yourself clearly and others dearly. And may the darkness never hinder you, but draw you onward to the light within you. Amen. Spiritual Direction, Soul Care. It's so good to hang out each week. Join us on this Wednesday, November 10 at 7 p.m. Eastern on Zoom for our midweek meditation, our guided meditation. I'd love to see even more of you there this week. Make it a priority, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you're watching elsewhere, go join the Facebook page. You can find the event in the Facebook page, and you'll find the link for the Zoom room there. It's always so good to be together each Sunday live, sharing wisdom and growing as we do this new journey of walking through and discovering the gifts of imperfection. Thanks for joining us for session 1. And I'm so glad that you were with us and journeying with us. Have a great week, and reach out and let me know how I can support you in any way that I can. Would love to journey with you. If you need a soul care session, let me know. Let's connect. Have a great week.